Here we are on the K5 again. Got a few things I wanted to show that you really want to look for and make sure that you take care of whenever you're doing a rocker replace. And if you're not taking out the rocker box, this is kind of a trick to get it in here and out of here. So this is the bottom of the kick panel. As you can see, it's rusted through. This is an old piece of the floor right here. Goes like that. And this piece kind of tucks clear back up in underneath of there. And you know, if you're replacing this whole piece, we didn't. We had to put a patch in here to kind of take care of the rust. Usually those are rusted out from sitting water and all sorts of, you know, dirt and stuff just stays packed down in there till it rusts out, and then it finally lets the stuff out. So we rebuilt this instead of replacing one. If you're replacing it, you may just cut this whole bottom piece off to access it from the outside. That's a way to do it too. But I didn't want to have to cut it out. I wanted to be able to get this piece out and back in. So if you come around here to the inside, I'll show you what the floor piece looks like here. We wanted to go ahead and throw an extra brace in here, cutting out the bottom of this pillar completely. You know, maybe it's overkill, maybe it's not, but I'd rather do a little extra and not have to go back and try to re-straighten stuff. So this is the floor piece right here, and the first thing you got to do is get your floor out of there. Now these are common places for these guys to rust out, because from the factory they just kind of spot welded those together like that. There's the spot weld I drilled out from the outside. And then water just kind of flows down in there over time, and this whole bottom piece gets filled up. So if you're replacing these, get all these pieces out of there and apart, so you can get back in here. When you get back in here, we're going to POR 15 all the back side of this, all the inside of our rocker box. That way we know we've neutralized the rust. But on your floor here is a seam. You want to get that seam taken apart. This is another common place. Water gets down in there and rusts all the way along there. So we have a new bottom kick panel piece. It'll go right back down in there. Like I said, it's a jigsaw puzzle. I'm not putting it back in there because of that. But the new one will go back up in there. And then the floor and this, I guess what they'd call an inner rocker panel, there's actually about two ways that you can fix this. One is you can get a full floor piece here and an inner rocker. So this floor piece here has a partial inner rocker that comes right back to about here. And then they also make an inner rocker that you can stick in there. But the problem with that inner rocker is it doesn't have this floor line right here. And if you're wanting the body floor lines to be original, you're going to have to get, I guess, what they call a floor cab extension piece. I'll grab that next, but before I do, there's a couple different ways you can put your floor pan back in now. This floor pan is designed to come all the way up past this seam that I was talking about. And you can see this is your dimmer switch indent, so it actually comes all the way up to here. Now you can, most of the time these are rusted out to where you can't actually repair and salvage it originally. I think we might try to do that. There's two options. One is we're going to cut it here, along here, and then put a 90-degree bend in that so we have a seam to go right back down in it. Or what we might do is just POR this whole seam, because that's all good now, and just weld right onto the top of it and eliminate the seam. So we'll talk to the guy who's in charge of this one and the decisions and see which way he wants to go with that. You're going to want to finish cleaning up all of these spot welds before you POR. That way you don't have to go back and grind them off later. But then you come back in from the back side and weld your inner rocker panel on from here, and then you'll put your outer rocker on that and weld from the outside. Let me grab that floor extension piece here real quick so I can show you what I'm talking about there. Now these they don't make for the Blazer, so you're going to have to get a pickup one. And the pickup one is different than the Blazer. It's longer, so you're going to have to cut this back piece off. But now what I'm even kind of finding, if you line up your bolt holes here, is that we're still close to actually fitting in there. And this body line right here is a little bit different than it is on the way that they made the K5. So if you come right in here close, Amber, and look, you can see this corner is kind of buggered up, and we're going to have to fix that. But this body line here is a little bit different than this one. And this one in the cab has another mount hole right here, where right here it has a reverse 90, and it's up against the rest of the frame of the Blazer. So, not real sure. We might have to cut this here and take a little section out of this to get the right length in there if we're going to reuse this body line. But before I do use this one or rebuild this one, I'm just going to cut this end piece off and kind of get it fit in there and see if we like it. If we don't, we're just going to rebuild this tiny end piece. We had to rebuild this corner. This is inside of your outer rocker, but usually these are starting to rust out along this edge. We've still got this outer one here that holds on the bottom of the panel. We need to rebuild that one still. Now, you can buy these replacement, or you can just cut some metal and shape it up. That's what we did. You know, the time it takes for the parts to get here and to cut off it and put it back on, sometimes you're just about as fast to cut it out yourself and build a piece of metal and make it work for yourself. So that's what we did. So there's two ways, like I said. You can have that front floor pan, but now this is the same piece that's already on the floor pan. So what we're going to do is try to get this all the way in there, one solid piece from front to back, because all the bracing on these Blazers are right here in this rocker box, in the subfloor, and how it's connected here to the back quarter panel. You really want a nice solid long piece in here to give you that extra structure. I mean, we could just cut it right here and splice it, but I don't like that as much. So we're going to get this fit in there, and then whether we cut down here on this body line and put the floor piece in to replace this little part, or we kind of cut right up along this body line, I'm not real sure yet. We'll decide once we get that in there. But you can see on this one they actually folded it to fit up in that factory lip right there. So if we do use this and the top one goes over it, we're going to have a little corner there we'll have to deal with. But we'll show that probably as we get closer, or show it once we get it done. So the next thing is to just get in here and neutralize the rust. Start cutting this floor extension piece, get it fit in there. Then we'll get it tacked in. Once we get that tacked in and get this corner back in, we got a new cab brace that's coming in here. The old one was completely rotten out. These also have a additional plate that goes on the top of it, so there's a little bit more structure we'll put in here, and then we'll get rid of our brace once we have that all tied back in. Once we get this piece welded on, we can probably even get rid of our brace here if we want to. But then we'll get the floor in, the outer rocker, this piece on, and be flying together here pretty quick. I guess.
Yeah, it's really good.
Did you show this panel that we replaced? I don't know, do you want to show it?
Sure. I'm still recording, so.
Okay. Yeah, we can get the old piece. That's kind of something that's good to know how to do. So if you're wanting to use OEM patch panels so that you have a nicer body line, you got to kind of know how to take these old panels apart in a way that you can still use this piece you get off from it and don't wreck it. So you got to know the way that they put them on from the factory. They spot weld all along this inside edge. The finished product you can see here, you actually weld from the outside and then grind it down. So all of those holes were in here too. Then all along the top here, there's a spot weld here, 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 and here. Those basically hold this top lip on. And then from the factory there is supposed to be a post here, but that was cut off. But that's all that holds it on, and then you cut your seam. So the original one, someone did some patch jobs that I probably wouldn't agree with very much. But to each their own. If that's his own vehicle that he wants to drive like that forever, that's okay, but that's going to happen when you get too much Bondo in anything. And then the other problem the owner had is he bought this, is this whole corner wasn't able to even fit a light into it. So it just kind of had deck screws and stuff screwing that trim molding in there. So what he really needed was all this bracing that comes from the factory to fit your light in there. I actually filled up 2 of the holes here. We'll re-drill those for your trim and then your light. But what happened is this was in a rear end collision at one point, and this pillar here, the same one here, never got fixed correctly. So it was shoved too far this way, and our latch wasn't catching correctly. This had too big of a gap in the middle. So once we got the old panel here cut off, we had to do some body work on that pillar. Again, if you're doing a show truck and you don't want it to have any dents anywhere, you'd cut that pillar off and completely redo it. But on the inside structure here, it's all nice. So we decided to leave it. There's no body damage in here that you can see. The only damage you'd ever be able to see is if you took the lights out and looked back in that pillar, you'd see that it was in a little bit of a crunch at one point. But that's the difference between if you're building a driver or you're building a show truck or show car. But now everything will fit in there. It latches nice. It's nice. It's got a really nice gap. Right here, these panels, I don't know if you can kind of look down it like the eye line, but they fit really nice. We got just a tiny low right there through the seam. I like it that way if you're going to be Bondoing it. That way you got a little bit of material on the seam. I see some guys trying to make it look like there's no seams, and you go through and you start looking and there's actual spots that are almost ground through because it looks nice, but the metal loses all of its integrity. So you got to be careful making metal look like it's never been touched. If you're trying to do that and you're, I guess using a TIG welder, you're probably going to get a little further ahead with a TIG welder, getting it close. MIG welder, I find I get it plenty close enough, but I like just that small 1/16th to a 32nd low on my seam to Bondo it. But yeah, that's, I guess, a panel replacement on the quarter panel here. That's one way to do it if you don't want to replace the whole quarter panel, is you just kind of go through and start patching it up. We got a lower panel down here that we're going to be putting on next. go on right about there. So we'll come along and cut this right underneath the seam. I don't like cutting them in a body line. I don't like cutting them past the body line. If I can, I like to keep all the original body line if it's good. That's why I ground up in here to see if we have Bondo. If there's no Bondo, I know it's fairly straight, and this panel should align pretty well. But basically when you have these replacement panels, where you get in trouble is you can see the dents right up here where that press in the machine kind of buggered it up. Now you can straighten that out, but that's where your body lines might not match up perfectly to your door body line. Is just those reverse curves and those turns like this. So anytime I'm replacing a panel, if I can, I try to leave the original body line as much as I can and then just come in and cut below that with our new panel. That's pretty easy to have that panel be perfect fit then. Need to finish up our brace here. We'll POR behind all that, make sure the rust gets stopped for good. And that's it.